So welcome everyone. My name is Milena Viceconte. I'm a historian of art and convener of the Cambridge Disaster Research Network. Today we will starting for the last term of seminars of this academical year. And I'm very glad to present the session of today, which will focus on the role of museums and institutions, educational institutions, in communicating disasters and risk. As you know, we have different types of museums that works on these topics, but we are today three speakers coming from three different museums. And the aim of today's session is to talk with them about how they and to explore the features and the strategies of their museums, their educational programs for both expert and non-expert public, and their role in the global and local context of the management of risk. As usual, the seminar will be, the structure of the seminar will be three presentations, about 15 minutes each one, and then a question and answer session. I had to ask you to put your micro off and remind you that this seminar is recording. So if you don't want to, don't want to put your video on, you can do it. So I'm just move on and starting to present the first speaker. I'm very glad to have with us today Dr. Chiara Petrone. She's a petrologist, and she's working in the Natural History Museum. And today she will starting for talking about her experience in both academical fields and in the museums. Chiara, over to you.
Yes, I share my screen. Okay, so I hope you can see it.
Yeah, great.
Okay, well, good afternoon, and thank you, Milena and all, for this invitation. I'm very glad to talk a bit about how we communicate, particularly volcanic hazard, at the Natural History Museum. I would like to start just with a brief introduction about myself and my group. I'm a volcano petrologist, researcher, which means that basically I mostly study active volcanoes, and I try to answer a question like this one: what are the magmatic processes that they lead to a different eruption style? How long does it take to build an eruption? What are the implications for the volcanic system? And for doing so, I look at the rocks erupted by a volcano. So it's a bit like a forensic approach. I need to, for an eruption to occur, then collect the rock and then study them. And in particular, I focus on the mineral that made up each different type of rock. Something like this one on the top, we have a nicely zoned plagioclase from the 2019 Stromboli eruption, and at the bottom another quite complexly zoned pyroxene from Popocatépetl volcano in Mexico. The reason why I focus on the mineral is because they really hold a lot of information. They are really an archive of information and help us to understand the processes happening in the plumbing system. So they help us to reconstruct the architecture of the plumbing system and the dynamic of the plumbing system. Something like this for a study that we recently did on Popocatépetl volcano in Mexico. So we can try to answer all the questions above. In terms of the type of research and how the volcanology petrology research group looks like at the museum, apart from myself, there are several PhD students. Some of them are shown here. Some of them you already know, like Mihai, here Mihai Swift. And we have projects, current project on Stromboli volcano, and then two other on Popocatépetl and Colima, which are the two most dangerous volcanoes in Mexico and in general in Central and North America, but also other projects on Guatemala, Tanzania, and a few other places. But let's focus more on the museum aspect. And being a research scientist in a natural history museum, it's a privilege, and it's also very interesting and challenging. So the Natural History Museum in London, and NHM for short, as probably most of you know, is a world leading institution, is the second biggest natural history museum. But it's also a research institution. So we are over 150 researchers between earth and life science, and all our work is underpinned by the huge collection with over 70 million curatorial units or specimens that range from botany, entomology, mineralogy, zoology, and so on. As a museum, we recently launched the new strategy, and we pledged to be advocate for the planet. And so our priority are clearly to trying to secure the future of the collection, but also transform the study of the natural history and creating a resilient and sustainable organization. In doing this, we try to generate new knowledge via research, education, training, but also try to engage and involve the widest possible audience. And how we do communicate natural hazard at NHM? Well, I think we can divide these in two big strands. On one side, we have more the more institutional way, which is the gallery, the permanent gallery, and in particular, I will focus today on the volcanoes and earthquake gallery, which is the main one in terms of volcanic hazard. At least for what's concerned us. And then on the other big strand is all the outreach activities that we do. So let's start with the volcanoes and earthquake gallery. Here is the entrance. The original, so this is a new gallery that was opened in 2014, and because the original gallery that was called The Power Within, that opened in 1996, after 20 years was kind of very old. So when I joined the museum in 2011, there was this project to refurbish the old gallery. And I was there at the right time when we started to this project, which at the beginning was just like a little bit of refurbishment, and then it turned out to be a much bigger project, and it's a completely new gallery. The main idea is that the gallery is strongly linked to school curricula, and it's divided in three areas. The first one, so when you enter, is the volcanoes part. Then you move into the plate tectonic section to give the wide geological context. And then you end up in the earthquake gallery, which and the end of the earthquake gallery is the centerpiece of the gallery, which is the earthquake simulator, which was already probably the only remnant piece of the old gallery. All the rest is new. And there was like really choosing to link with the school curriculum it was really made by purpose, because this gallery is really used by school, and in normal time, not like this one. I took this picture on Friday when I went finally to the museum after several months. You can see the gallery are completely empty, which is a bit sad. But in normal time, along this corridor, there will be, you can find just school all the time. and the teacher will use the content of the gallery to guide through their lecture and their curriculum. And there are a lot of hands-on activity, a lot of fun things that a student can do, and hopefully, I mean, they can learn quite a lot. There is one section dedicated clearly to volcano hazard and the impact of, in this case, volcanoes on people. This is the famous cast from Pompeii to show the impact of living in a volcanic area. But also, I mean, we try to present not only the danger, but the somehow the beauty and how the volcano are useful, because clearly they provide water, heat, they provide a lot of minerals that are essential for our life. But at the same time, there is a cost for mining these elements. And so there is a section dedicated to the sulfur mine and the cost of on their life, and how much this has an impact on their life, and which is the cost of today life for other people. Then we try to, another way to convey the message is to use everyday objects. So on the left-hand side, there is a melted bottle and a melted glass from the 1902 eruption of Monte Pelé in Martinique, the eruption that destroyed, completely wiped out the city of Saint-Pierre, leaving only one person alive, a person that was in jail. So these are really strong message. On the right-hand side, we have a calendar and a destroyed clock donated by a Japanese family to the museum after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. And they really donated this to the museum because they wanted to the memory of this event to be preserved. You can also see a live straw, which enabled people to drink even contaminated water. And probably my favorite object is the shoes for the rescued dog, that they play a really an essential role in earthquake this area. Many of the people that visit the gallery, they might not have a direct experience of an earthquake, and so here is the volcano, the earthquake simulator, which is based on the 1995 earthquake sequence of the Kobe earthquake. And is basically you enter in this Japanese supermarket, in the Kobe supermarket, the earthquake start, and when people exit from the supermarket, they find all the destruction and the supermarket destroyed and all the rubble around. And at the end of this, there is a big screen narrating the story of the 2011 Tohoku tsunami. Then we have this case with the emergency kit, which for many people is a life-saving necessary tool that they really need to have all the time ready to save their life. But clearly, I mean, for many people that visit London and the museum, they have no idea what this means. So clearly, there is the section dedicated to the research, not only to show that we do research in the museum, of course, but mostly to trying to inspire the new generation of scientists. So they can read the sort of work that we do, some object for field work. Actually, these are my boots, and then a hammer and a notebook. And then there is the giant volcano suit of the giant volcanologist, which is probably the scariest thing in the entire gallery. In terms of engaging, well, there are a lot of activity in the museum. there are interactive and educational shows. This one is called Volcano Town. Is a permanent show at the museum, and this moment is online, and it's dedicated to school. With the help of a science interpreter, the school can play some role in trying to save the life of people threatened by the impending eruption of the volcano. Then there are some crafted activity like this one, how to make a volcano. Lots of learning resources on the website. At the same time, my group and myself, we do quite a lot of activity. So some talk. This is a recent talk that I gave at Camden School for Girls. This was mostly targeted to inspire and to show girls that they can do a career in science. So not just to show the volcanic hazard, but to inspire them. And then we have a lot of some activity. This is quite fun. A 3D model of a Popocatépetl volcano in Mexico, and we try to simulate different type of eruption. You can see some ketchup here that is simulating a lava flow, and then the a more explosive eruption. This activity we do either in school or during other event at the museum. And usually, I mean, it's quite nice for the kids. And you can see that we have this green thing. There are some Monopoly house to simulate where the different village can be and how they can be affected by different type of eruption. So we participate in festival. This is the Exhibition Road Festival in 2018, New Science Life at Excel, where we show a new, an enhanced 3D model of the, our 3D model of the volcano, but also we show rocks, how a rocks looks like under the microscope that probably people cannot really see it. And then we have a studio in the museum where we can do some more activity and a talk with a science interpreter, interview a scientist. Recently, we have been doing this last year online, of course. Clearly, it's quite different if you talk about volcanic hazard with people in London or if in place where they are actually living and on the shade of the volcano. So this is, we have been doing quite a lot of workshop in school, in particular in Mexico, with my colleague Hugo Delgado, my Mexican colleague. This is a school nearby Popocatépetl, one of the most dangerous volcanoes in Mexico. We talk about rock, but we also show the hazard map of Popo. We try to, the kids, they locate their village, a nearby village, and then with the help of the custom model, the 3D model of the volcano, and then we simulate different eruption, and we try to show the kids how a lava flow will affect their village or different type of eruption. Clearly, that they can take this model to at home, and hopefully they will start a discussion with their parents and their grandparents. In terms of the role of the museum, well, clearly, I mean, we cannot forget the big role played by the museum in terms of preservation of important samples and making them accessible. So just few examples. This is another melted bottle from St. Pierre, from the eruption that I showed you. But these vials, they are really important. They contain the ash of the Soufrière and St. Vincent, the 1902 eruption. They were collected in Barbados, and they were collected every half an hour. So they are not only important for from a volcanological point of view, from a research point of view, but also because they preserve a unique record that actually, I mean, if you go now to St. Vincent, it's quite hard to find the pure sample of the 1902 eruption because it's been blown away or covered by subsequent eruption. So with this object or with this sample, we can really tell a big story. and use for research. Just finally, few points that I would like to make in terms of communicating volcanic hazard. The conversation is never easy. It's not easy if you are not in a hazard-prone area, because it's too far away, you can simplify too much. But at the same time, if you are in a hazard area, it's difficult because there are a lot of economic, social, and human implications. And then scientists and stakeholders, we don't really talk the same language. And then the other point that I would like to make is that geological aspect is quite often overlooked. We forget what we have under our feet. We are too bio and human-centric, and we try to forget that everything is interconnected. And I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chiara. Fantastic presentation. We have quite a lot of questions on your presentation, but let's continue with the second speaker of today is Dr. Wyatt, Senior Director of the Morrison Planetarium and Science Visualization in the California Academy in San Francisco.
Great, thank you. Well, it's always interesting going second and wanting to immediately reflect on things that you've just heard, but recognizing that I have a story to tell and focusing on that. Just a couple of things before I start the actual presentation, which is I think there are a couple themes that run through what I'd like to communicate. First is that I think museums are critical because they have both authority because of their authenticity, and at least in the United States, museums are very trusted institutions relative to other institutions, in large part because of that. So that's one of the things that we tend to foreground. We also, I think, provide context for people. So being able to, and what I'll focus on, because I am the director of the Planetarium, I'll focus mostly on the story context that we provided for an earthquake show that we created back in 2012. And then finally, one of the things that I think a lot of us in the museum field are thinking about, and we've thought about it for a while, but it's taken, I think, for different museums in different contexts, which is that we're very interested in behavior change in our audiences, which is something that's extremely hard to measure because we're a formal science education institutions and we don't track people the same way universities or schools track students. But whether it's an interest in seeing that attending an art museum will create greater attachment to the canon of artwork being presented, or whether it's a science museum, hoping that people will continue to pursue an interest in science, or in the case of these sort of topics, an interest in seeing that we can advocate for behavior change when it comes to making decisions around earthquake preparedness or other topics, which I kind of wanted to touch on. So I'll just go ahead and go into my slide deck, starting with our requisite logo. As I mentioned, I am the director of the planetarium. My background is actually in astronomy, but in our planetarium, we actually present content over a wide range of topics, including, in this case, earthquakes. And so I will have a little bit of a focus on that, but my engagement with the institution goes wider than the planetarium. A lot of that is around the visualization studio, which I run, which is basically creates most of the media that we use both within the institution and of course now increasingly online. So just a little bit of a context for the California Academy of Sciences. We're actually nearly a 170-year-old institution, but this is our building in Golden Gate Park, so far from downtown San Francisco. But it's actually the largest green building in the world, open to the public still after 13 years open. It has a living roof, and the institution itself is both a public-facing institution and, like the Natural History Museum London, a research institution. Our research, however, is very much focused currently on life sciences. So we do active research in very traditional sort of natural history museum topics like entomology is a strong department, ichthyology. We have an aquarium as well as part of our institution. So we have very active research in coral reefs, in island biodiversity, and increasingly in California. as you might imagine. So if you kind of zoom into the building here and land on that living roof, the kind of hill that you see in the distance actually drapes over the planetarium. And again, we're going to focus a lot on the planetarium just because this is kind of where my main focus was in telling the story of earthquakes for our institution. And for what it's worth, it's a very modern design. It's a 30-degree tilt dome, and it seats about 300 people. So the show I want to talk about is called Earthquake, Evidence of a Restless Planet. It had an accompanying exhibit, and the exhibit has since been replaced, but that allowed us to create kind of a dialogue, in a sense, between those two experiences in the institution. But because we have a kind of a trapped audience for the 20 some odd minutes of the Planetarium show, we're able to construct a narrative. That's a lot of what I'll focus on in the next few minutes. But then I also want to just reflect a little bit on the exhibit components, and some of them are just, it's just kind of interesting to see how similar certain elements are to what you've already heard about from the Natural History Museum in London. A couple notes: we are in California, so we are in a very active earthquake zone. And California is sort of famous for earthquakes, and even amongst Californians, San Francisco is famous, particularly for the 1906 earthquake. I think what's interesting, I'm not a native Californian, but if you talk to native Californians, there's almost this, there's a glibness about earthquakes in many ways, and there's like, you know, people talk about when they were kids, an earthquake would happen, and they like, is that 4.2? Nah, it's more like a 5. So like, just there's a kind of entertainment value that earthquakes have for Californians, which is a little weird as an outsider. But we also, in doing our some preliminary research, recognized that even Californians were concerned about safety. People who did not grow up here were more concerned about earthquake hazards. And people who were visiting were essentially terrified. They just thought that in the 5 days that they're visiting California, an earthquake will happen and they would probably die. So that's an exaggeration, but it was an interesting gradation in what we understood our visitors to be coming to the institution to show with. So that said, let me go ahead and kind of introduce the show. And again, I think I'm going to focus mostly here on context. So we actually opened the show. This is a computer-generated scene. We are in San Francisco. We have a very strong kind of visual effects team that produces these programs. And this is often when I talk about this scene, I talk about the technical aspects of it. But the function it played in the story was starting in a Northern California, kind of familiar Northern California setting on a beach just north of San Francisco, looking at sunset, using the ocean as kind of a metaphor for the passage of time. And then also recognizing that, you know, you have this sort of daily changes in the ocean, or even hourly changes in the ocean. The sand on that beach is maybe 10,000 years old. I'm actually not a geologist, so I'll defer to more expert opinion. And the rock that you see over on the right-hand side of the image, that's actually formed down about 300 miles south of San Francisco and moved north over a period of millions of years. So we introduced these kind of overlapping periods of time in the opening shot as a way of contextualizing where we're going to go with this, which is I'll mention in a moment, is a concept that I've thought of as like telescoping time. But let me actually just first show you a little bit about the context for the show. This is actually the second scene in the show that I'll talk you through. This is a little bit about the technology of the theater. We use multiple video projectors to project on the dome, but what you need to understand is that that image on the left represents the entire planetarium dome. And what we're doing is we're sort of flying by the very famous ferry building in San Francisco, which lies at the end of Market Street. And we're recreating San Francisco in 1906, the night of the earthquake. We knew that our audiences wanted to experience that. And then again, for the authenticity, we actually used US Geological Survey recreations of the ground movement in the earthquake. We simulated the destruction of the buildings consistent with photographs of that particular intersection in 1906 after the earthquake. We created a procedural city to populate this place so that we could fly over the city. It's very small in screen there. But then after this, as we see the damage, we shifted to a more diagrammatic perspective in order to provide a little bit of like emotional distance. And then what we wanted to do was provide context for what happened during that earthquake. So we went to another computer simulation of the rupture that occurred on the fault. We used very, very simple and straightforward representation of shift along the fault plane represented in yellow, shaking on the surface represented in red, shaking intensity. And by keeping it very easy to read, because this is passing by in a very immersive environment, and like right now, that yellow sort of line that you see across part of the screen, in fact, crosses about 180 degrees or about 90 degrees of your field of view in the planetarium. This shows some of the other overlapping data sets, again, kind of reinforcing this idea of authenticity. But these elements combine to take you from the street level perspective in San Francisco out to a global perspective of plate tectonics and tectonic movements that are, of course, the cause of earthquakes. And so this shift of local to global is something that happens really nicely in the planetarium. But then furthermore, we wanted to contrast this aspect of human time with geological time. And so, again, this is what I think of as like telescoping time. And we decided that the historical aspect could provide a gateway into that. That if people could see, and in addition to the 1906 earthquake, there was a 1989 earthquake in San Francisco that would allow people to kind of reflect on what their own personal history or their parents' personal history might include. But then this historical event, which you can still see, if you know where to look, evidence of in the city. And then thinking about how that social time extends to geological time. So this idea of telescoping time kind of leads us to what I thought of as for the show as a time management issue, which is that we started in the present on that scene on the beach. We jumped backward to 1906. And then to provide further context, we wanted to go back basically 200 million years to look at the movement of plates over time. And this connected, by the way, with our exhibit to some degree. And then from that point on, we move in a continuous fashion forward in time to the present and basically the future. And so the present, helping people think about kind of where we are now in California, why earthquakes take place. And in fact, all of our shows also include a live component. So we were able to bring in, basically we showed Earth the day of the show you were seeing it, and we showed the most recent earthquakes. So if an earthquake occurred in the recent past, we would go and visit that location. We could show the depth of the earthquake, we could contextualize it. And then clearly, when you look at the location of earthquakes around the globe, you see the evidence of plate tectonics that you were told about earlier in the program. But so the idea here is in this storyline to keep things as kind of manageable as possible for people as they're watching the show. And so this is our view of Earth as it was 200 million years ago. You can see North America on the left, South America on the lower left, and Africa kind of in the center. And we actually fast forwarded time to be able to see the shift in continents. And then I'll just kind of play actually the last few minutes of the show to kind of, oops, sorry. I'm using a new interface here. So in the interest of showing these videos as high quality as possible. This is the Bay Area here. I don't know if you can see my arrow, but San Francisco is right kind of in the center of the image. What you're seeing here is a simulation of not a past earthquake, but a potential earthquake. So this was our pivot from the present to the future. And so we're saying that we can use computer simulations to look at what the effects of an earthquake would be in the Bay Area. We did not use the San Andreas Fault, which is where the earthquake took place in 1906, but instead we looked at the Hayward Fault, which is in the East Bay, if you're familiar with the Bay Area. And then we wanted to then bring people into thinking about, first of all, we wanted to end on a hopeful note, but we also wanted to bring people into the sense of thinking about the future. So here we're showing a representation of what is a giant shake replicator in Berkeley in the East Bay. We transition now to an actual video of this. This is actually immersive in the dome, so it's covering your entire field of view. And we're centering on this device, which actually isolates the building above from the shaking ground below. And so we're beginning to introduce this idea of potential solutions and preparedness at the level of engineering. And then this is actually similar to devices that were deployed in San Francisco's City Hall. Now, for people who know San Francisco history, City Hall was built right after the earthquake in order to kind of show that the city was being reborn. And so being able to transition to this element in the city that represents hope and optimism in the wake of an earthquake, and showing how we're working to preserve that was an important component of the story. But then we wanted to transition back to where we started, not really the entire show, but that scene in 1906. And so we actually transitioned to the interior of the ferry building, which on an interesting engineering note, uses a different plan for preserving the architecture, more about minimizing potential injury to others than preserving the building. But we then can end the show with this view of San Francisco. And you'll notice in the background, the clouds are moving rapidly. There's an artificial time lapse going on here. So we've tried to kind of touch on this theme of historical time into contemporary time, and then using the time lapse to kind of give the sense of change happening as Chiara mentioned, kind of invisible to us. And when we don't think about it, Earth is shifting the same way the clouds are shifting, kind of trying to create this parallel. And so the show ends with this sort of beautiful view of San Francisco at night. So ending on a hopeful note, but with the context of earthquakes being essentially inevitable. They will happen at some point in our city. The question is when and how we can prepare for them. So what's interesting about the show is it really cues up this story, but it doesn't present specific solutions. And I'll touch on this very briefly on my last slide. But one of the things that the shows are not good at, they're very good at being able to provide this kind of overarching context, but they're not very good at providing specific solutions targeted at individuals, just because it's hard for a pre-recorded show to do that. Let me just say a few words about our exhibit that accompanied the show. On the first of all, on the right-hand side, you can see an ostrich. Now that seems kind of puzzling, except that we are a life sciences institution, and so what we did to let me see if I can actually, as I said, I'm kind of using this software for the first time, so I think I real-time added myself back into the image here. So because we're a life sciences institution, what we emphasized in part of the exhibit was how the plate tectonics actually influenced life, and how we can look, and it offered an opportunity for us to talk about evidence, but also this kind of message that these geologic processes do influence life over the long term. And so ostriches are an interesting example of a species that crosses multiple continents because their predecessor existed on Pangaea, and then as the continents split apart, they and their relatives were separated by greater distances. Behind that, you can see kind of a gray dome. That was an introduction to a very basic introduction to seismology in California. And behind that is a big yellow square kind of in the center of the image. That's our, what we call shake house. You walk into a San Francisco Victorian and you actually see different objects on the walls as the shaking simulation occurs. We actually simulate both the 1906 and 1989 earthquakes in that to give a sense of the difference in the magnitude, although shake houses don't replicate vertical motion, so it's actually not so great. Doesn't give you nearly the sense of the magnitude. But as you exit that shake house experience, you come into this area about preparedness. This is devoid of people because it was one of our kind of publicity stills for the exhibit. But we give people different ideas and different tools to think about how they can prepare, having just seen what happens inside an artificial environment due to an earthquake, to make choices about what they can do around their own home, and things like the earthquake kit, which I think you can't quite see here, but is another element that we saw earlier at the Natural History Museum, London. So in addition to this, we did collaborative projects with our local television station about earthquake preparedness, as well as general resources for elementary school students. And I just wanted to very quickly touch on a couple other shows that we've talked about. I know upcoming, I think I saw that you're going to be talking about asteroid threats. We actually touched on that in a show called Incoming, which was, and there the context we provided was really helping people think about really the power law distribution of these objects. So there are lots and lots of small ones, a few mid-sized ones, and very few really large ones. But much like earthquakes, are kind of an inevitable experience of living on a planet. And finally, I just wanted to mention a program we did called Habitat Earth, which talks about ecosystems. And one of the messages of that show is about how ecosystems are better than human systems at utilizing and recycling energy and recycling, et cetera. And so we did, for the live portion of that show, a piece about choices that people can make to conserve resources, and we used the particular example of food, and we delivered that message. So inside this larger context of a show about ecosystems, we delivered that message live with a presenter who could fine-tune their presentation to whatever audience they had in the theater at the time. And be able to more directly address kind of questions and concerns in a way that was more human and approachable than a pre-recorded presentation. So we found that very important in the context of the efficacy of that messaging, because people were more likely to trust an individual saying that to them than they were to trust a pre-recorded narration. So thanks very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to the discussion later.
Thank you, Ryan. Very, very interesting. And so let's finish with the third one, the last one of our speakers of today. I'm glad to introduce Constanza Gómez, which is director of the Procultura Foundation, especially for the Zona Sur of Chile. And I will help you.
Milena?
Tony, yeah.
I managed to find the sharing thing, so I think I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So before I share, I just want to say thank you. I'm very honored to be part of this seminar together with these amazing doctors and presenting our very humble museum in contrast of the museums that you've already watched. It's beautiful to see what the other speakers showed, because it shows us where we want to be. So I'm going to share now a small presentation. My presentation, as Milena said, it's about the museum, the site museum of Chaitén. I come from the country of Chile, so I had a special smile for Ryan on his presentation, because basically here we have a joke that we have superpowers in Chile because we can't feel any earthquake under 7, because we just have them all the time, right? So we are a country of natural disasters. We have earthquakes constantly. We have forest fires. We have, I think the only thing that we're missing is hurricanes. Everything else we have, tsunamis. So Chile is a very long country, and we are divided in different regions. But and it's very centralized. Everything happens in Santiago, the capital. So we usually have like these little quarrels between different regions about everything happening in Santiago. But if we do have one thing in common, from the north to the south is that we've all faced natural disasters. But still, in our country, we do not have any other museum that preserves the memory of natural disaster, but our Museum of Chaitén, which preserves the memory of what happened on the eruption of Volcán Chaitén on 2008. So I'm going to share now. Okay. I think I am sharing now. Let me see. Yeah. Can you see?
Yeah. Can you please put it in a presentation mode?
I think
it's okay.
Okay. I think that's. Can you see the whole of the screen or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can just see the starting of the second slide, but it's okay. We can see. Okay, great.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is the entrance of our museum, right? So as I was telling you, this is Chile, so very long country, and right there in the middle towards the south, there's Chaitén. Chaitén is all that green area. It's one of our biggest communes in Chile, administration areas, right? So this is part of Patagonia. I'm sure all of you are familiar with how beautiful and amazing this area is. It's special for forests and large trees and natural parks, rivers. We have water everywhere. But what also we do have a lot is volcanoes, right? So this is Chaitén. Chaitén is a very small town, only 4,000 people in the urban area. I think in the whole of the green area that you saw before, we have 7,000 people in total. So it's a vast area, but very low populated. And so also the towns that you can find, the only town that you can find in the area of Chaitén and in the areas around Chaitén, all of them are very young towns. So probably none of them are older than 100 years or even less. So you have here a town of people who live in houses that were built by their own grandparents. That's how young the towns are. And you can see there in this picture a volcano on the back, right? And you think that's probably Volcán Chaitén. Well, it's not. That's Corcovado volcano, because in this area, they didn't know about the Volcán Chaitén before it erupted. Nobody knew there was a volcano right there. They knew about other volcanoes like the Corcovado, which is always watching them, right? It's right on top of the town. And we also have here in this map, you can see this white area towards the right upper end of the picture. That's Volcán Michimahuida. That's how big that volcano is. It's huge. And we also had Volcán Corcovado, which you saw before. Here below in the left down corner of the picture, that's the urban area of Chaitén. And in the middle up there, you can see Volcán Chaitén with the red arrow, which nobody knew existed. Now you can see there in that picture how the water flows, right? There's a river that comes down from that mountain towards the urban area. And we'll come back to that river because it's basically our main character. Now, that's a picture of the urban area of Chaitén. So that's a really small town. On the background there, you can see a small hill. That's a very special hill that Dr. Chiara Petrone will remember. It's called Vilcún. And that little hill has caves in it, which are very interesting. And we learned about them after the eruption. So we'll get back to that little hill in a bit. Now, you can see that around the town of Chaitén, there's a river. That's the Blanco River, the White River, that embraces the town, right? Or used to embrace the town. And that's our main character, because against all odds, it wasn't the volcano specifically which caused most of the damage, because this eruption wasn't like a normal eruption. It's very similar, and it's a very specific type of eruption, very similar to what happened in Pompeii. It's that's the column of ash that started on the 2nd of May in 2008. It began with some earthquakes the night before, so people were aware that something was happening, because this isn't a very seismic area in terms of like every day having earthquakes. So constant little earthquakes were getting everybody very scared until the morning of the 2nd of May. So it was recently the anniversary of the 13 years and the eruption started. And this type of eruption, and I'm not a geologist or a volcanologist at all, so I might say wrong things, but it's very similar to what happened in Pompeii, because it's an eruption that doesn't focus on lava, but it's focused on gas and ash. So this column of gas and ash started flowing up, and then the ash started covering everything. So soon everybody knew there was an eruption. They thought it was the Michimahuida volcano, the huge white volcano that I showed you before. They thought that was the one exploding at the time. Little they know that that there was a new volcano to add to the other two. So it was a scary eruption, and it was devastating to the people of Chaitén, not only because of the damage, but also because all of them were evacuated. So the whole of the town, the 4,000 people that live in this town were evacuated. And they started this exodus. It's very dramatic, because they thought that they were leaving their town for maybe 2-3 days. You know, I'm leaving on a Friday, I'm coming back on Tuesday. And again, little they knew that it would take them 3 years to be able to get back to that town. So this is the biggest drama here. So with all the ash that fell from the eruption, you can see in this picture with red, we've outlined the original course of the river embracing the town. And then you can see how the ash and the sediment from the eruption made the river overflow, and it flooded the whole of the town and cut the town by the middle. So now we have the north area and the south area of Chaitén. So what the government wanted at the time, because the disaster was complete, you know, the river flooding everything with ash, it covered all the houses, it destroyed a lot, and it also affected very hardly on the heritage and the identity of this town, because as you can see in this picture, the sediment moved away the ocean. So you can see back in this picture here that the ocean was right there, the shore, it was the background, the backyard of the town. But after the eruption, all the sediment took over the what used to be the beach, and it pushed the water away. So all the fishermen that were used to have their life right there, they had to change everything. And also they were forced to leave their town. So the government started trying to get them to live in other towns around this area that were safer. They considered Chaitén a risk area, which it is, but basically most of Chile, it's a risk area. And to facilitate people to move, the government bought their houses, right? But the Chaitén people didn't want to give up, so they started this quarrel with the government. It took them 3 years, and they sued the state. And finally, the government had to allow them to get back to their homes. But getting back to your home after a disaster like this, when your government doesn't want you to be there, it's very difficult because they didn't have much aid from the state. And actually, after 13 years, the amount of money that the state has spent in helping Chaitén people to recover, it's very minimum. So they had to clean their houses themselves, and basically there's no new constructions until the Museum of Chaitén. Now you can see here where the museum is set, and that's almost like a big square next to the river. Now, when people started coming back to Chaitén, the government started selling them back their houses so that they could move back. But the area where the side museum is set was saved because it had 9 houses that were not that we couldn't recover, right? But we could preserve these houses as memory of the event. Now you can see here, this is one of the houses in the museum, how the ash covered most of the house, and it went in, and you have 9 houses completely covered up to the middle of the house, the second floors, all flooded with ash. Now, this area, as I said, was decided to be preserved as a memory of what happened. And on 2016, that's when we got involved. When I say we, I'm talking about Procultura Foundation. We are a foundation that focuses on heritage and identity as a tool for improving the quality of life of the communities where we are working. So we believe that heritage and identity and the community are the main characters, the most important things that you have to focus to have a good community that can grow economically and as a social, as a community, I mean. So Procultura Foundation, we moved to this area in 2013, and we met with the people of Chaitén, and they were heartbroken. It's a society that were forced to leave their homes, that when they finally came back, they had to clean everything themselves. Most of their neighbors didn't come back. So from the original population, only half of them were able to come back. So their neighbors weren't their neighbors, and their families were spreaded. So you have a community that's broken, right? And they're trying to heal. And this is when resilience kicks in. And this is what we most admire from the community of Chaitén, and what convinced us to get involved. The government of Chaitén and the ministries that work here invited us to get involved and help with lifting and creating this site museum. And we thought we had to. So there's some pictures here that can show that it's 2 meters of ash in this area, 2 whole meters of ash above the sea level. And here there's the area that we got the concession for as a foundation to make this dream of a museum a reality. And I think this picture was taken in 2017. This was after we finally got some funding, because that was our first aim. We need to get funding to do this. Our foundation doesn't have their own, endowment. So we basically work presenting projects to different funds and try and lift money to be able to do what we do. So we started working on this, and we envisioned what we wanted. So we wanted to preserve these 9 houses, and we envisioned this interpretation center where you could learn about the event and how it affected the people. So what we first did, as you can see in the photo, is we took away the ash in some of the areas to create paths so that you could walk as a visitor on the original level of the street and see the real impact of the 2 meters of ash. But this is Chile, and as much as we would like to be a developed country, we aren't. And funding and money are not, it's difficult to get. So it took us about 2 to 3 years to be able to get the money and start building this interpretation center. But in the meantime, and this is what's very interesting about this museum, is that it's a museum that started before it had where to show and exhibit. And it started by creating the library of information that we wanted to share. And for this, what we decided is that we needed to talk to the people, talk to peoples and organizations, universities, people who were studying the area, psychologists who were working with the community, geologists and volcanologists that were visiting this area. And this is how I had the honor to meet Dr. Chiara Petrone in one of her in a visit that she had to the area of Chaitén, among a lot of other amazing volcanologists who have been great support for our project. And so we started talking to people and talking to the community. We did this work along with Universidad de Chile and their Department of Psychology, trying to figure out what the impact of the event had on the community and what their hopes were and where the hurt was, because they were very hurt and they needed to heal. And we started learning of how this event became part of their heritage. And you can see here, these children in this picture, they weren't born when the eruption happened. They've never seen an eruption, but still, when you ask them, what's the thing that you like the most about Chaitén, it surprises us that they draw the volcano erupting, because this is what they heard, this is what they've grown with, because the volcano is still there. They're actually, the volcano, it is at their doorstep. So resilience, and that's something that we really admire. And also science. So talking to all these scientists, and this is where I take you back to that Vilcún hill that I showed you at the beginning, with these caves. It has paintings from indigenous communities in their walls, on their walls, and you can see that other communities have lived here, and other communities before our community today have dealt with other eruptions. This is a very volcanic area, and so scientists after the eruption in 2008 started coming here and studying the area, and we started realizing that Chaitén was very special and very, very unique because of all the eruptions that have happened here. And you can find ash in these caves. And this is where I want to thank Dr. Karen Holmberg from the University of New York, who has been working with us since 2016. It's been just amazing. So the science part of this has been a key also on learning that opportunities can arise from something like an eruption. And finally, we found the funding and we started building the Chaitén Museum. If you can look at the background there and that chain of mountains that you can see in the back, there's a little area that's a little bit more red than the others. That's the volcano, the Chaitén volcano. And that's what you can see as the main character from the interpretation center. So this is what we finally were able to build. We cleared our paths. We made walls of rock around the areas with the houses to protect the ash there. And we built the Interpretation Center. Now, our program is based on the exhibit room that we have written down and envisioned what we want to show in that room, and what we want to share with our visitors. But it also has an area of it. It's called their mediation room, but it's basically community links, a community room where people from our close alliances in the town, like the school and the hospital, the tourism community, that they can use the space to do workshops and work together with us and develop different projects. And we also have, as you can see, this is a model so that you can sort of easily see how the program is. So you can walk and you can see all the ash and the houses, and then there's the Interpretation Center that, as you can see, has a runway around it, because basically what's important in our museum is it's the houses, it's the environment around you, it's the whole territory. So the main walk with this pathway, with this runway, sorry, around the building and all the way to the viewpoint that you can see there in the second floor. It's one of the most important parts of our visit. So to be able to see the houses and the impact, and to see the volcano, you can see the volcano back there in the background, and it's pretty active still. So this is our Interpretation Center. I'm going to leave this presentation with Milena, so if any of you want to see it in more detail, you can. So yeah, very active still. And what we want to show in the exhibit room, basically we've divided our exhibit in 4 stages. First, the most important thing that we want to share is what happened to satisfy the main curiosity that brings people here. What happened? What type of volcanic eruption was it? How many people left? How many people came back? Was there any lava? Answer all those first questions that come to mind, and then we move on to a second station of the exhibit that focuses on science, what we've learned of this land after the eruption, and how many volcanoes do we have? What's the volcanic history of Chile, first of all, and what type of eruption was it, and what you can find. And it gives the value of Chaitén as a geosite, right? And then we move on to the part of the exhibition where we focus on that we are not the first community that has faced an eruption in this area, and it's basically part of your heritage. If you live in this area with all the risks that involve, this comes with your DNA, right? Of course, we still have a very strong speech of awareness of the risks of this area, and we work with the ministries of our country and the National Services of Geology and ONEMI, which focuses on emergencies, to be able to clearly state what the risks are and the strategies to try and make it lower risk and to respond to emergencies, right? But it's also part of your heritage. And yeah, so today the museum is a reality. We've been able to build the Interpretation Center. We are slowly fitting it with what we want for the exhibit. But people come here all the time, and what we've learned from the whole experience is that natural disaster can be very harsh and disruptive, but we've learned that what the community has suffered more with wasn't the eruption itself, but the 3 years that they were forced to live away from their land. And that's where the resilience had to kick in, because people need to belong. and this is basically what our museum has tried to honor. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Constanza. So let's stop the recording and move on to